Principal Matters Podcast, episode 408.
Hello, Principal Matters Podcast listeners. We are so excited to have a very unique guest this morning, not unique herself, but unique with the work that she does and what brought her to us. So I'm here with Karen Dudek-Brannan this morning, and I'm so excited to talk about all the things you do and all the things you think about, Karen. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so Karen, you are a professional development specialist. You're trained as an SLP, a speech language pathologist, and you are the founder and CEO of Dr. Karen LLC, which, from my understanding, is a company that focuses on empowering therapists and educators as they develop interventions. And when we talked offline, you mentioned you like to help people get out of the weeds. So let me lob this back to you and tell us about your work and tell us what it is that you do. And also lump in there about your podcast, the De Facto Leaders Podcast. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I can give kind of the quick synopsis of everything I've done. So I did start out as an SLP back in the early 2000s. So I was a school SLP for about 14 years and was doing all kinds of side projects. So I did adjunct work and things like that at universities with teaching and research and some clinical supervision and supervising student teachers who were going to be special ed teachers or were currently special ed teachers. And then I was also getting my doctorate in special ed and getting my special ed director credential. So I was thinking that I wanted to do something at a university or potentially be an administrator in special ed or potentially a curriculum director, because I think special ed and curriculum should go together. They don't always, but anyways, we can get to that.
That's a different episode,
later,
right?
If we get to it. But so when I started my job search, and I know that depending on where you're at, you may be aware that there's a huge need for SLPs. So for me in my area, especially in Illinois, it's not hard to find an SLP position, but the administrator positions and the positions at universities, the job market is way different with how that works. So I found that it was a lot more challenging and I really wasn't prepared for the job search process. So at that point, because I was considering what worked for my family and do I want to move and all of that, I started thinking about other options. So I was considering private practice. I was also really interested in the teaching and learning aspect. I really enjoyed teaching and research and just creating products for people. And also I had all this research that I'd done during my doctoral work that I wanted to share with people. And the academic publication process takes a very long time, as you likely know. So
listeners, you would see me like rolling my eyes. It's a lot. Academic publishing and academic research, all of that. It's long and arduous. You're right.
Yeah. So long story short, I wanted a way to share all of that with people. And then also I wanted it to be practical. I wanted it to be something that clinicians could use right away. So let's see. So back in 2015 is when I started doing my work for Dr. Karen LLC. And I started creating programs. Initially, I started for speech pathologists to help them with a framework for language therapy, because that's one area, especially SLPs in the schools don't really have a good framework. It's so broad when you're thinking about vocabulary and cognition and all of those things. It's really difficult for SLPs in the schools to figure out what they're supposed to be doing in that area. So that's really what I was doing during my doctoral work. So my first program focused on that. I've done some other work since then, supporting, expanded more to talk about executive functioning and leadership. So obviously that is way beyond SLPs. So all of that would be relevant to really the whole special ed team, but really the whole school team, honestly, because I see that as more of a universal design initiative. But so a lot of the work that I do in Dr. Karen LLC is around courses, trainings, support for related service providers who are putting those kinds of supports in place. And then of course, other people that kind of has expanded to other people, because I get a lot of teachers, parents, and of course, administrators who are trying to think about how would we put this in place. But what I really like to do with my courses and the support that I offer is help people who are in that related service provider role to see themselves as a leader on their team. A lot of times, some of them can kind of emerge into this pseudo-administrative role, even though maybe initially they didn't consider themselves to be a school administrator, just because the kind of a work that an SLP or a social worker or a counselor or a psychologist, and I could keep going with all those different roles, but a lot of the times that kind of work there's some direct therapy. There might be some work collaborating and co-teaching with teachers, but then there also can be a coaching component for the teachers and also even the administrators, because they have specific subject matter expertise that an administrator might not have that could help them with some of the programming decisions. So I really help them to understand the direct treatment aspect, which is how I help them get out of the weeds and then create some bandwidth to be able to think about those other things that I would consider to be more advanced, or maybe things that are a little bit more challenging because they require more long-term strategic planning. And so the podcast is the courses that I offer are more tactical, and I do include some more strategic planning type of things as well, aside from direct intervention, direct strategies. But then on the podcast, I'm focused more bigger picture on conversations we could be having about reform and leadership and how can we work together as a team. So
Listeners, spoil alert, Karen
yeah,
and I are flip-flopping our podcast. So you will hear me on hers
yes.
soon, De Facto Leaders. So look for that there. But I want to go back to a lot of what you just said. I think there's a misunderstanding sometimes about what speech language pathologists do.
Yes.
I also see in my work many times, as you said so well, SLPs are called upon in so many different conversations.
Mm-hmm.
There's language, there's the articulation piece,
Mm-hmm.
there's the language piece, the am I communicating? Am I being understood in my communication? There's that piece.
Yeah.
And then there's the tie to so much to do with how sounds come together, written orally as we read. And that connects too, as you referenced, to OT, to PT, to school psychologist. You know, if you principals, if you have a student who is, selective mute, that is a whole interesting
Mm-hmm.
situation to unravel, and you can't do that without an SLP in the room. And something like that comes along twice in a career. It's not common, it's not easy to understand, so there's that psychological piece too. And I agree with you. I think because of the nature of that work, many times SLPs are leaders.
Mm-hmm.
They are able to do that essential code switching between talking to a 6-year-old, then talking to a teacher, then talking to a principal, then talking to a parent, then talking to a therapy team, or some sort of additional services. So it's that extensive wealth of knowledge that I'm not sure, since this is an audience of principals, I'll say this, I'm
Yeah.
not sure all principals know how to tap into that expertise and how to say, let's get an SLP at the table here.
Yeah.
So your current role is actually even different than
Yes.
that, right? So tell us about you are currently working as an administrator in a completely different world, right? So tell us about
Yes.
that.
Yeah, so I'm a child welfare administrator. So I work for the Department of Children and Family Services. So I guess the Child Protection Agency in Illinois. Typically, that's what it's called in other states. But what I do right now is that I'm a product manager. So what I do is I am the go-between between the IT side, as they're building a caseload management system, and the social work side. So I'm making sure that what they build meets the needs of the workers that are out in the field. And then I am in the area that does preventative services. So we're trying to prevent families from, the children needing to go into foster care or being removed from the home. And as well as just some of them, we're trying to prevent them from coming in to the system, period. So trying to connect them with services. So it is with social work and speech pathology, there are actually a lot of overlaps, because social work, a lot of it is there's some direct intervention and then there's also some case management. So there's a lot of that carries over. But the reason that I was interested in this position specifically, the product manager role, is because the work I was doing in my company is about developing products. So there's a whole process that you would use for getting feedback from people who would be using whatever you're creating, understanding that there is a training component when you're thinking about people who are out in the field and what system components and features do they need in order to meet their needs. So it was the product aspect and understanding the technology side and how to integrate all of those together that got me interested in product management specifically. So yeah, honestly, it was one of those. I was in the schools and then I left the schools and was doing, was self-employed, and there were a number of reasons why I decided to go back to the public sector. Part of it was the security aspect, which is, even if things are going well for you when you're doing consulting or private practice, there's just a lot of things that you don't realize when you leave that are really nice to have when you're in a system with the pension and all of those things. So that's a whole side conversation. But I did feel a little bit as I was doing some of my work with de facto leaders, and I did start talking to a lot of principals and leaders, and I just really felt like I had unfinished business in a management role. And working by myself with a small team, I was doing a lot of that, but it's way different when you're on this big team with this huge project that you're doing. And I just didn't feel like I was ever going to get that experience and learn how to do that if I stayed doing it by myself. So I was considering a lot of things. I was thinking about going back into the schools, but then I just happened to be at a job fair and ran into a recruiter from the agency that does the staffing for the other agencies. I was also considering State Board of Education as well. So I was like, hey, why didn't I ever think of this before when I was doing my job search 5 or 6 years ago? And so it just kind of, you're putting out a lot of feelers and looking at different options. And this is the one that lined up with what I needed. And so I love that it gives me the chance to have the speech pathology, the special ed, the administration, but then also we're adding just experience in another agency in the social work side, which there's a lot of overlaps with the schools as well. So yeah.
So there's
I'm trying to remember what your original
No,
question was, but you were asking about what I'm doing now.
Yeah, there's a couple of things I want to kind of parse out from that. And one of them is you mentioned product development, product design principles. My principal brothers and sisters out there, you are going to shout your agreement here. We get inundated with vendor-based product offerings. And I think many times principals, schools, districts, they know they need support. They know assistive technology can be a life changer for many students. But how do you vet through what works and what doesn't? And I don't know that you can answer that question, especially because you're on the development side. But how? I think you're going to tell me the most important thing is have the right people at the table as you vet out what you're going to use. But tell me a little bit more about that. And then I have a follow-up question.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you mentioned that, because in my job search, I was also looking in the ed tech space, and I actually did interview for a role that was a product management role for a product that would be for schools. So that is also partly how I ended up where I am right now. And so I think and I do talk to a lot of private practice therapists and people who are kind of go between the private and public sector. Maybe they have some contracts with the schools to offer therapy, but then they also offer private therapy. So they're kind of in both worlds. And there's a lot of skepticism about technology because of a lot of different things with just attention span, and do tech companies have kids' best interest? And I will tell you that as I was talking to people at ed tech companies, my strategy for job searching was I'm connecting with people on LinkedIn or any type of means that I can, reaching out to them and saying, hey, I'm really interested in the work that you do. Can we hop on a quick 15-minute call so I can learn about what you do? because you pretty much have to do that in order to get interviews these days as well. So it's networking, but also research at the same time. And I will tell you, there is a large span of quality. I talked to companies that all they were doing was taking old textbooks and just plopping them over in this tech platform and putting them out there.
Yep.
And they had no one who had any education background. It's all like UX design and developers, which you need, but you don't only need that. And then I've talked to other companies where they have a curriculum expert, a researcher, subject matter experts, and then they also have people on the development side. And so they have all of these things to make sure, yes, does this work from a technology standpoint, but also, is this evidence-based? Is it actually going to work for kids? So,
and trainers, you mentioned, go ahead. I'm sorry. You mentioned trainers too from,
yes,
you know,
a lot of them
principals.
have trainers. They have professional development people that will come out to your district.
Exactly.
Or they'll have a customer support person that will talk to the superintendent and say, like, here's how you can look at this data and see if this is working.
Yes,
so
exactly. And I think
things.
you know, my advice to principals when they say, you know, I'm a small school, I have this certain amount of money, I need a product to help with this problem that I have. I always say start with the training and implementation and then work backward, because you don't have the time to fully implement any sort of program or assistive tech or whatever by yourself. So see what the support is and then go look at quality and evidence-based outcomes and that type of thing, because that will help you.
Let's take a moment to thank our sponsors, and then we'll be right back. As a school leader, you have a vision of a thriving, supportive educational environment where every teacher and student can succeed. With DigiCoach, you can turn that vision into reality. Imagine walking into a classroom with DigiCoach on your mobile device. Its customizable look-fors and pre-written feedback statements streamline your feedback process, saving you precious time. You're not just observing, you're actively supporting your teachers while generating data to drive instructional change. With the new coaching plan feature, you can effortlessly document action plans and coaching conversations. This ensures every teacher is supported and you can track their progress related to your campus goals. DigiCoach empowers you to customize the platform to fit your specific needs, reinforcing your vision at every step. And when you need support, the DigiCoach team becomes your team, with consulting efforts focused on realizing your organization's goals. By using DigiCoach, you lead your school to remarkable progress. Ready to turn your vision into reality? Visit digicoach.com and tell them that Will Parker sent you. Why is IXL used in 95 of the top 100 U.S. school districts? Because it works. Research across 45 states show that IXL schools outperform other schools on state tests. With IXL, you get a personalized online learning and teaching solution that helps you improve achievement, empower teachers, track progress, and more. This one platform for K-12 helps teachers accomplish what normally would require dozens of other tools. For example, as students practice skills, IXL automatically adapts to ensure each learner is always supported and challenged at the right level. IXL also provides every student with a personalized learning plan to help them close knowledge gaps effectively. One of my favorite things about IXL is their personalized test prep tool. For exams like the SAT and ACT, IXL will analyze a student's most recent score and generate a custom list of skills to help them boost their scores. If you want to take the load off of your teachers so they can do their best work, IXL can help. Learn more at IXL.com/PM today.
My next question for you is, you have done so many different things that have led you here, but along the way and on your podcast as well, you have interviewed many people and you have gotten many different perspectives. What mistake or misstep or misunderstanding do you see emerging again and again and again with principals or school leaders? What is it that we're not seeing and no one is telling us?
So I think that my biggest realization, as I did talk to people in the leadership positions, was that I think when you are somebody who's working directly with students, you think whoever else is on your team, like your principal or your superintendent or whoever it is, you think, oh, well, this person is making decisions about what I do, so they have all of the power. And so I think that once I started talking to people and really listening to the challenges that they were having, that everybody feels that way, no matter what their position. And they think, oh, as soon as I get into this position, I'm going to have it all figured out. And then I'm going to be able to make decisions. And then they get into that position and realize how hard it is to be the decision maker, or that maybe they don't, the decision-making ability is different than the way that they thought, or it's more complicated than they thought it would be, especially if there's somebody who was a principal in the district where they taught, and now people who were their peers are now reporting to them. So I think that I wouldn't necessarily call it missteps per se, but I just realized how much there really isn't a roadmap, and people just get thrown in without training. And I think that that's just like, it all goes back to training. And I will say that I think that's true for myself as well, that yeah, I did feel as an SLP like I had big training needs, but then as I've gone into different roles, both as a self-employed person and as an administrator, it's like the training almost gets worse the more you move up. They give you less support,
Right.
and you're just supposed to figure it out. So I think that there just needs to be some kind of support system in place, and we can't forget to train and provide that professional development for the people who are deciding what the professional development is, because a lot of times that is the administrators. So yeah, I mean, I think that's the biggest thing that's come up for me.
Well, and I'm gonna, listeners, when Karen and I talked a couple weeks ago, we got into a conversation, Karen, I'm sure you'll remember, about power.
Yeah.
And I haven't stopped thinking about that since, from the lens of a principal, because many meetings are about power, whether we admit that or not. And power is closely tied in the education world with knowledge or skill, or let's say it, perceived power. And so if someone is running a meeting and they don't have the knowledge or skills that they need to run that meeting, they may rely on power to make decisions. And to close this loop, I think that the best thing a principal can do is, first of all, acknowledge when they don't have the knowledge, acknowledge when they're using their power to cloak lack of knowledge, and they might not have the ability or humility or understanding to say, hey, I better get an SLP at this table, I better get a psych at this table, I better get a parent advocate at the table, like whatever it is, to destroy that power struggle so that you can be effective as a team. So I don't, it doesn't surprise me to hear you say that that's something you see. And I think what that then also tells us is that's where the weeds are. You say you like to get people out of the weeds. You
Yeah.
like to get them into a place where they're providing the appropriate therapy, or they're developing the appropriate plan or whatever. So in addition to those missteps, and thank you for saying you wouldn't call them missteps, what are challenges that you see principals and school leaders facing that are maybe new or really complicated? And how do you help them work through those things?
One thing that has been a really interesting conversation that I've had is when you move into a leadership role, and now you have all these people reporting to you, and they're in jobs that you've never done before.
Right.
That is a very interesting conversation, and there are strong feelings, I think, on both sides.
Correct.
One, I would say from the clinical side, is how is this person going to evaluate me when they've never done my job? Now, my opinion is that that's not the most productive attitude that you can have about that. My thought is that there are things that your principal can offer you that have, I don't want to say they have nothing to do with your job, but your job just isn't your clinical expertise. It's also, how do you show up as a team? How do you communicate? How do you support your other team members? How do you work with people? There's other things that have to do with your success in doing your job that aren't just your subject matter And so I think that you need outside perspective. Sometimes having somebody who's not in your discipline give you feedback is actually really valuable. So that's what I'm telling the clinicians and the subject matter experts when they say things like that. I nudge them in that direction. But I do think that it is important if you're in a position like that where you are evaluating someone who is in a discipline that where you don't necessarily know what is this clinical protocol. Like, how would you know that? There's nobody who's going to be in a job like that where they're going to know all these different jobs and have done all these different jobs. That person doesn't exist. So I think it is important when you are that person on the side of being the evaluator to have those conversations about, okay, here is where I can offer support and we can have mentorship, but then also how else can I support you and make sure that you get that feedback specific to your discipline. How I did it when I was an SLP is that I officially reported to my principal, who was not an SLP, and they gave me feedback based on those types of things that I just mentioned, like how well am I participating and leading these IEP meetings and explaining things in non-technical language so other people can understand. How am I interacting with kids and managing the sessions? So those types of things that you don't necessarily need to know how to do some of the SLP protocols. But then also there was a speech coordinator who wasn't my boss, but I would reach out to her if I was stuck and say, hey, can you come in and shadow me for a day and give me some support here? Or I would reach out to my other SLPs. So I think that can be part of that evaluation conversation to make sure that people have that mentorship in place, even if you're not the only one even if you're not able to give it. And then you can maybe even utilize that in part of that evaluation. And then I also like to this is one of my pet peeves when people I think somebody on Facebook one time said something like, why don't, teachers should get grades too. It was somebody who didn't like the grading system. And I'm like, what employee evaluations are? And do you know how much time they take principals? It was just one of those things where I'm like, you don't get it.
You don't get it. Well, I think it's important here where I pause and say I had zero idea what an SLP did, and zero. And then when I moved to my current district, I became fast best friends with the speech language pathologist, and we ended up being roommates for a couple years. And I was blown away. I had not only with the breadth of my own ignorance, but with the skills and talents she had. And I'm telling this story not to lift up SLPs, although of course that's what I always want to do. But it's a symbol of all the other things we don't know about the experts in our building. She would sit on the couch at night and she would be writing IEPs and progress notes, and she would talk about some of the extensive, complicated nuance of her work. And I thought all she did was work on the R sound, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's the common thing that people know.
Right. I was so incredibly ill-informed about her work. And so since then, thank you, Lisa Dorenzo, for teaching me all of those things. But since then, I think I have learned it's okay that I know nothing about certain components of a child's needs, just so I have the humility to find those people and bring them in. And to your point, I think a role like that can be incredibly lonely and isolating if you have a leader or a staff who works in isolation. And so those opportunities to put whoever it is, SLPs, school nurses, psychologists, PE teachers, AP chemistry teachers, put them in a room so they can have time together. But I think the key there is to have them come out with questions or list of what they need or training opportunities or whatever, so that they can continue to spread their expertise. The truth of the matter is there are not enough SLPs in the world for what we need. And there's not enough district dollars to hire as many SLPs as we need. So we do have to move to a model, or have a model existing, where there is direct therapy, but the reach of that expertise is broader. Teachers get some training in what a specialized field is. Principals get training in that. And so therefore we can kind of build the capacity of the experts on staff. So tell me this, is there anything you've learned? We are already running out of time, Dr. Karen. I knew we would do this, but is there anything you've learned or seen or heard along the way that was particularly pivotal or transformative for you as a professional?
Oh, there's so many different things. So okay, the one thing that I will say that that I come back to a lot is the idea of leading from the bench, de facto leadership. And I can think of so many good examples here where you're not you're not officially the one in charge, but you still have influence. And I think coming back to there's many times when people feel like they got benched or they were taken out of the decision, but they do have a way to make an impact. It's just a lot of times not the way that they thought it was going to play out. And I'm trying to think, I can think of so many different examples, but I know that there was a time that I was interviewing for a position that it was kind of a hybrid special ed director, curriculum director position in my district. I didn't get it. The person who got it was definitely the right person for the job. So it was disappointing. And then when that person got into the position, she was really like her background was curriculum. And they kind of at the last minute were like, oh, and this is special ed as well. It was one of those positions that
Right.
kind of morphs into itself. So I think with that situation, what happened a lot was with speech specifically, they'd be like, here's how we want to do everything for special ed. And then they wouldn't necessarily consider that with SLPs, we have bigger caseloads and it just works differently for us. And so we almost like a lot of those decisions, sometimes it feels like they're coming down from the top and I'm not the one that's officially making this decision, but I think what shifted for me was that a lot of times the person who's making that decision doesn't have all the information and the directive that they give is kind of a first draft. And so I think from the leadership perspective, it does help to have that idea of, yes, I do need to give people direction, but I also need to have some flexibility so that if I realize that what I gave didn't take all this information into account, I can adjust it. And what happened a lot of times was it would be like, here's your protocol for how you're going to inform parents of IEP meetings. Obviously, for a special ed teacher who has maybe 10 kids and has this whole plan versus an SLP who has 50 kids that has different types of plans, maybe my protocol looks a little different. So what I ended up doing was saying, okay, I understand that you want it this way. You made this decision because, it works this way for special ed teachers, but what if we tried it this way? So
Mhm.
instead of just saying, nope, we don't do do it that way around here, that's not going to work, just say, okay, here's a suggestion. Like, I hear what you're saying. I understand why you wanted me to do it this way. Here is a way that I can do it that's going to meet your needs as well as meet my needs, as well as meet the families and the kids' needs. So kind of come with a proposal that's an
Right.
adjustment. And so I think just the idea of understanding that you can have influence, understanding that you want to make it easy, make it an easy yes for the other person. And then also if you're the one in the leadership position, creating an environment where people feel like that they can do that and they can come to you with that,
Well,
and just have those conversations with you.
here's what I love best about what you just said, Karen. First draft leadership. I love
Mm-hmm.
that concept. And when I record podcasts, I always want to find a thing, right? That's my
Mm-hmm.
thing. I love that. Principals can, put something out there, but no, it's a first draft. And even say that, this is a
Mm-hmm.
first draft decision. My superintendent talks about tiers of decision making. And sometimes a decision is made and that's it. No discussion. This is what we're going to do.
Yeah.
But then there's other tiers where it might be a process decision where
Yeah.
I want input. Another tier might be, we're going to take a year to look at this. We are going to get
Mm-hmm.
so much input. We're going to try some things. We're going to adjust, adapt. So I think for principals, there is absolutely times where you say, this is the way it's going to be for now.
Yeah.
We may need to adjust later, but now this is it. But if we look at all of leadership as a draft, I think to me, that's really not only empowering, but it's kind of freeing too, because that means I don't have to be the know all. I don't have to be the one that carries all the responsibility of decisions on my shoulders because everything's a draft, I
Yeah.
love that. I really do love that. So tell our listeners, Karen, as we wrap up, tell our listeners where they can find you, and anything else you want to kind of leave with them as we wrap up.
Oh, let's see. I mean, I think I covered the big ones today. Ooh, one other one that I didn't mention that I think is a common thing that I just think it's a whole interesting conversation of the idea of this isn't relevant to me, or that's not my job, or this professional development isn't relevant to me. So I think that kind of goes back to the conversation about, oh, this person can't evaluate me because they haven't done my job. So I do think that's a two-way street of people in both positions, both the leader creating a culture where it is okay to giving people a chance to showcase their expertise so that they're willing to listen to other people's expertise. And so that they realize, you know what, I'm part of a team here. And this thing that I think is irrelevant, because it's what's going on in the entire building, I need to know about it.
Right.
And then people on the other side having that openness and, being willing to figure out how things are relevant to them, even if it doesn't seem like it on the surface. So that could be a whole other podcast episode. So I won't get too into that, but that is another topic that I actually wrote an article about that I could share in the show notes as well. Just something that I like to share with people in that SLP, other related service provider position. But as far as where you can go to find more about my work, so my websites are drkarenspeech.com and drkarendudek-brannan.com. And then my podcast is De Facto Leaders. So it's on all the directories, Apple, Spotify, YouTube. And then also you can find all the episodes on my website at drkarendudek-brannan.com/blog. And then one thing that I do offer, I do have a free guide that it helps people on school teams figure out everyone's role in executive functioning, which I mentioned a little bit on this episode. So that is to sign up for that guide, to learn about that, you can go to drkarendudek-brannan.com/EF guide.
Excellent. Okay. So, and that, all of that information will be in the show notes, listeners. So you can go to William D. Parker's website and find all that information. So thank you so much, Karen. This has been so fun. Our biggest challenge, as I knew it would be, is we have so much to say and not enough time to say it. So hopefully, though, we have made a difference for a principal who's commuting to work today or took the dog for a walk or whatever and learned a little bit from you. So thank you so much. And listeners, feel free to find Karen and her work at many of the places that she just mentioned. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
You can find free resources like this one at williamdparker.com. Subscribe for our free weekly newsletter, which contains bonus material, and also check out the links for Grow Academy's Masterminds, Executive Coaching, and Keynote presentations from my books, as well as from Principal Matters Associates. You can find out more under our speakers tab at williamdparker.com. Thank you for learning together, and thank you for doing what matters.